In Matthew 18:21-35, Jesus told Peter that unless a person forgives from the heart, he will be thrown into prison and tortured. It's true. When we are unwilling to forgive someone who has wronged us, we are thrown into an emotional dungeon of torment, and we will not get out of that dungeon until we forgive. Forgiveness is important, not for the benefit of the person who wronged us, but for our own benefit. Forgiveness doesn't right the wrong, but it does help us to find freedom for our souls from all of the anger, resentment, and bitterness that gnaws away at us like a cancer. But what if the person you need to forgive is you? What if you're the one who made a terrible mistake or hurt someone deeply? What then? What if you made a decision you now deeply regret and wish with everything that is in you that you could go back and make a different choice? Maybe you are haunted by something you said or did, and now you're swallowed up by guilt and shame. Sometimes I think it is harder for us to forgive ourselves than it is for us to forgive someone else. I cannot begin to tell you how many times I have beaten myself up over the choices I've made or the mistakes that I've made. I've had many regrets in life, and perhaps the biggest regret is how I saw life during the Depression. I made choices, said things, did things, and acted in ways that placed a mark of disgrace on my soul. But in order to stop beating myself up and let go of those regrets, I had to admit my mistakes. I had to receive God's forgiveness, and I had to forgive myself for all of the hurt and pain I had imposed on others. But I've got to tell you, none of this was easy. Before I had dealt with the pain of my abusive past, I had harbored so much anger and resentment that during the Depression, all of that repressed emotion surfaced through fits of rage, which I unleashed upon my oldest child. At the time, I didn't know what I was doing or the harm that I was causing her until one day, after I began to deal with the pain of my past, I began to see what my emotional outbursts were doing to her, and it broke my heart. I went to her, even though she was still very young, and shared my heartfelt remorse with her. Immediately she began to cry, and she threw her arms around my waist, and she said, "I didn't think you loved me." I had to forgive myself for all of the choices I made during the Depression, like drinking while my children were around, or leaving them unattended while I went to sleep off another dark day of depression. I had to forgive myself for the desire to take my own life and leave my family behind to deal with the loss and aftermath. I had to forgive myself for all of the things I regretted, to let myself move forward and allow my family and God to forgive me. At first, all of this was very hard for me to do, especially forgiving myself and allowing God to forgive me. At the time, I didn't fully understand God's mercy and grace. Even though I had grown up in church, I didn't understand what God had done for me and the forgiveness He offered me through Jesus. I just couldn't see how a holy and righteous God could possibly give me anything but condemnation and judgment for the things I had done. Even as a young believer, even though I was beginning to see God differently, I still had a hard time believing that God wasn't mad at me or that He didn't condemn me for my sins and mistakes. Still, I was hungry for forgiveness. I wanted to stop hurting and stop being angry all the time. Even after I was instantly healed from depression and I experienced the joy of that deliverance for a while, there was still a lot of things that had to be dealt with. And I had to take up that mat and learn to live differently so I could stop being a prisoner to my past. So each day I continued to open my heart a little more and allow what God said about me in His Word to settle in my heart. And after a while, I began to see the truth. I began to realize that God did love me and that He wasn't mad at me, and that He didn't condemn me for any of the mistakes I made. He didn't treat me as my sins deserved. And once I accepted God's heart toward me and began to receive His love for me, then I was able to receive His forgiveness and to forgive myself. Receiving a revelation of God's love toward me was paramount. It changed everything. Realizing how much God loved me through His Son Jesus and that He took the punishment for my poor choices awakened my soul to receive from God. Accepting God's love and forgiveness somehow gave me the ability to forgive in a way I couldn't before. God's love and forgiveness is beyond my comprehension, but the wonderful thing is I don't have to figure it out. All I need to do is receive it. And when I do, God fills my heart and helps me to forgive both myself and others, even when it is difficult. Dear one, just as it is so important to forgive another person who has wronged you, it is equally important to forgive yourself for any mistake you've made. If you are the one you need to forgive, allow me to encourage you. Maybe you feel responsible for the place you are right now. Perhaps the things you've tried to keep quiet are haunting your soul. Maybe the choices you've made are causing you to feel guilt, shame, or self-hatred. Jesus wants to set you free from all of the anger, bitterness, fear, guilt, and shame. He wants you to receive his love and forgiveness. He wants to help you to let go of a troubled past so you can forgive yourself for the mistakes you've made. So you can stop worrying or playing that certain scenario over and over again as if somehow the past could be changed. Now, this may mean that you will have to face some things you don't want to face. Coming to a place of forgiveness is part of restorative healing, and restorative healing is a process that will cause old wounds and feelings to resurface. And you may not be ready to either deal with these things or even let them go. I know it is challenging to let go of the past, to stop harboring guilt and shame. Sometimes it seems easier to hold on to the pain than to face it. But finding freedom means letting go of whatever is holding you in emotional torment. In Isaiah 61, 1-3, it says that he, Jesus, was sent to preach good news to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted, and to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, to comfort all who mourn, and to provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, and the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. Beloved, if there are things that are haunting your soul, make the choice to let them go. Place them into the hands of Jesus and ask God to forgive you. Allow him to exchange the ashes of your pain, the grief of your mistakes and poor choices, and to remove from you all of the guilt and shame you have carried in your soul for so long. And allow him to give you a crown of beauty, the fragrance of gladness, and a beautiful garment of praise. And if you ask God to forgive you, then know in your heart that he has forgiven you. Do not beat yourself up any longer for the things that God has pardoned you for. Guilt and shame is a lie from the enemy. Don't believe that lie any longer. Do not tell yourself that God is angry with you and that he will not forgive you because the mistakes you made are too great. No matter what you did, no matter how long ago it happened, if you ask for forgiveness, you are forgiven. Receive it. Now, once you have received God's forgiveness and you have forgiven yourself, if you've knowingly caused someone pain, then go and confess to that person. I know this can be very difficult, but if you believe you've wronged someone, please do not keep it in. Go to this person and ask for forgiveness, because if you don't, it will fester and eat away at your soul just like unforgiveness. I experienced something along these lines just recently when a friend of mine thought she had hurt my feelings. The problem was she didn't come to me about it right away. For months, she worried that something she said affected our relationship, even though I hadn't given her any evidence to support that scenario. When she did finally bring it up, she apologized profusely about the wrong she thought she had done, only to find out that I had completely forgotten about the situation. All this time, I had no idea, while she agonized over it for months. Once she confessed, I accepted her apology and told her that I forgave her. I also told her that since her feelings were now out in the open, she was free to rest in the knowledge that no ill feelings were generated from the experience. In other words, she was free from the emotional prison she had put herself in. She was free from the tormenting thoughts that she had damaged our friendship. We have a tendency to blow things up in our minds, don't we? Sometimes to the point that it makes the situation worse. We do need to take responsibility when we knowingly hurt someone. We don't want to knowingly let something we've said or done settle into someone's heart. But at the same time, we don't want to put ourselves in that emotional prison either, continually beating ourselves up over something we said or did. Bottom line, if you think there is a problem, rectify it. Now, don't wait. Go to the person and talk it out with him or her. Share your heart as my friend did, so you can clear the air. You will both feel better. Jesus came to bind up the brokenhearted and to set the prisoners free. He came to provide for those who grieve, to turn the pain of their ashes into something beautiful. He came to strip away the sackcloth of despair and clothe them in royal garments of praise, to place a crown of beauty upon their heads. Jesus came to reveal himself, his favor, his grace, his mercy, and personal love. He came to bring healing and freedom to lost and hurting souls. He came to restore the places long since devastated and to rebuild what was stolen and destroyed. He came to bring healing and forgiveness so you and I can find what our souls truly long for and crave, the freedom to experience pure joy.